Today I'm going to be discussing the RU Teacher Education Lesson Plan format, specifically looking at assessment. There are two different types of assessment that you'll have on your lesson plan, and they're called formative assessment and summative assessment. Formative assessment is ongoing during your lesson. It keeps track and monitors the student's progress as you go on with your lesson. Some examples of formative assessment that I've used during my lessons are antecedent notes on specific students and checklists. Summative assessment evaluates the student learning at the end of a lesson, so see what your students learned after completing your lesson. Some examples of summative assessment are exit slips, quizzes, end of the semester like tests, anything that they turn in like a booklet or a completed work. So I have assessments on a specific lesson plan that I did, and during this lesson I had the students creating an experiment. So my assessments were formative. There will be a checklist that the teacher keeps track of to document whether or not a student answers questions during the lesson and whether or not the student successfully completes the experiment. So when I was doing the lesson, I had a checklist that had the student's name on it and the question that I asked them and whether or not they answered it correctly. And then it also had a second portion that had each student's name and whether or not they successfully completed the experiment. The summative assessment that I had during this lesson plan was the student will successfully master the objective if they complete the experiment booklet. So after the lesson was done, I collected each student's booklet and I went through it and I determined whether or not it was completed successfully, whether or not they answered all the questions, if their sentences made sense, if their booklet made sense as a whole, and that was determined whether or not they completed the objective. So for the formative assessment, an example of a checklist that I created was for my work sample unit, I asked the students questions. So the question portion was here, and it was what questions that I asked them, and who answered the question, and whether or not their response was correct or incorrect. So I kept track of the lesson and who answered each question, and I went back. So one of the students didn't answer the question, what is a liquid, correctly. So I went back to kind of check on this student to make sure she understood what a liquid was and what the difference was between a solid and a liquid. So that's another really great way you can use checklists throughout your lesson. Also, keeping notes of your students would be good. If you have a specific student who you're not sure if they're quite understanding the material or if they are going to master the objective, you can take antecedent notes on them to see what parts of the lesson they understood, what parts they didn't understood, and it can help you go back and reteach that information to them later if you need to do that.